and get other players that I may need to get us further than we're going. How does that all work, right? And that's what they're thinking about. And for me, I still think it's not that. I don't think philosophically there's anything wrong with running a baseball team like a business, like any real business outside the entertainment field, would run it. I understand the entertainment and wow factor, and I think that always has to be in the equation as well. You can't ignore Dennis's wow, wowing Dennis. We want Dennis to be wowed. Ultimately, Dennis, I think you're going to be more wowed with 95 win seasons than 45 home run seasons by one guy.
And I have a point to make along that. Let's thank Tony Hoaglund, Hoaglund, your State Farm agent, works out of Champlin, handles my insurance, offers a broad variety of services, and he's very easy to work with, whether by app, email, phone, whatever. Tony's very, very accessible, and so is his staff.
Hey, Minnesota sports fans. This is your local State Farm agent, Tony Hoaglund. I need you all to ask yourselves this question. If you're in an at-fault car accident and you are sued for $700,000, how much of that $700,000 will my current insurance company pay? If you are unsure or can't answer all $700,000, you need to give us a call. State Farm has been number one in car insurance since World War II and number one in homeowners insurance since 1964. For a no-obligation review of your current policies, call us at 763-421-4900 or check out our website at www.champlininsurance.com.
One other note, SodaStick.com, which sponsors the basketball podcast, does a lot of baseball apparel, Minnesota-themed baseball apparel, including Kent Herbeck shoving Ron Gant off first base.
Oh, he did
pretty cool
that.
T-shirt. Okay, Ron Gant accidentally falling over Herbeck off of first base. However you want to interpret the shirt, you can get it at SodaStick.com. So I think when you sign a big free agent, I think you get a certain, and we're talking about the business aspect, I think you get a certain bump in the offseason. You sell a certain number of people will get excited and buy season tickets or buy more tickets for opening day.
And buy some apparel.
That's not a lot in the grand scheme of Major League Baseball franchises. That's not a ton of money. It's important, but it's not overwhelming. Having star players or players with Minnesota connections or players who've even won championships in Minnesota doesn't have legs. I started covering the Twins in 1993. They were the model franchise in baseball. They won the World Series in 91. They won it, obviously, the second in 5 years. 92, they were the best team in baseball until mid-August or so. They were still, so going to 93, they're still considered the model franchise in baseball. They had Kirby Puckett on the roster, maybe the greatest sports hero in Minnesota history. They had Kent Herbeck, the beloved hometown hero with 2 World Series rings. They had just signed Dave Winfield, the future Hall of Famer from St. Paul.
Who would get his 3,000th hit?
His 3,000th hit as a Twin. They had every draw you could imagine. Success, championships, local heroes, superstars, and when it became clear that they were a bad team, people stopped coming to the Metrodome. And they stopped coming to the Metrodome for 8 years. They had Paul Molitor. They had Terry Steinbach. They had Brent Gates. They had Chuck Knobloch as an all-star. They had every outside reason you could think of to go watch the Twins in terms of local heroes, future Hall of Famers, great players, people having great seasons. People didn't show up because they weren't winning.
I think that's the point. And the same thing happened. And you can say, well, it was some degree of I think reasonableness that once the team wasn't winning, who wants to go inside in the summertime in that Metrodome? That was part of it. So you say, well, then Target Field will fix all that. There'll never be a drop-off in attendance because, people will always just go to that ballpark, and that's not the case. I mean, they've had a big drop-off in attendance, and that's
with Joe Mauer, and Glenn Perkins, and all these, and they've had good players.
They've had good players. They just haven't won, and there's a big difference. I mean, there is a difference. And if they were to sign a wow factor now and not win and do that to their payroll, people would be staying away and not just coming out to see if Brian Harper, for example, was going to hit a home run that night. I mean, it doesn't matter if he hits a 3-run home run; they lose 8-3. You have to put a team on the field that's got a chance to win because of the totality of the team.
And to be clear, we're not sitting here defending the Twins. We have been, we know that the Twins have been bad for 7 years,
right.
And we
know there's been no wow factor or wins, either one. That's the problem. It's true. They need to reconfigure. There's no question, and they need to hope like crazy that the young guys that they've got coming up, that they expect to be core players, really work. So when you think about the Yankee teams that were good, you think about that Seattle team that was so great. They had A-Rod and Junior, Kenny Griffey Jr. and Jay Buhner, and they had some pitching. they were an excellent team of mostly up through their system guys. The Yankees were the same way. The Yankees were able to add Paul O'Neill. They were able to
but Paul O'Neill wasn't some big free agent.
But he wasn't. No, he became a good player, a really good player.
Yep.
In New York. And they signed John Wetland, which gave them a chance to have Mario Rivera be a setup man for John Wetland. So the Posadas and the Jeters and those guys,
Rivera.
Yeah, those guys came up through the system, and that's the way long-term winning franchises are built without fail.
The latest Twins rumors that they are interested in Marwin Gonzales. Does that make sense to you?
It just, what's funny to me. I have no idea whether that's true. Do you know if it's anything more than just a rumor?
It's hard to tell at this point whether it's someone. Listen, general managers are constantly talking to other teams and agents, right? They're constantly doing that. And sometimes it leaks out that the Twins are one of 6 teams talking up to Marwin Gonzales' agent. Usually that's put out by the agent to drum up interest and suspense and make people feel like they need to move quickly to sign their guy. So I have no doubt that the Twins have checked in on him. I don't know at this point how real the interest is. It's really easy to be interested in a player. It's a complete leap from that to saying, oh yeah, we'll give you $10 million.
Well, then you're to the value point that you mentioned before, the value proposition. And what I was going to say, what I think is so funny is that the Twins have done a great job the last 2 years, and especially this winter, of signing guys that could be potential wow guys to really, really reasonable deals, guys that aren't the solution for the rest of time, but for the next year or two could be really interesting as it transitioned to hopefully, Sano, Buxton, Royce Lewis, Kirilloff, guys, become really core players and on winning teams. But at what point Marwin Gonzales is another one of those guys, if they got him reasonably, why wouldn't you? He's kind of like blanking on his name, the guy plays for the Cubs that was with
Zobrist.
He's a Ben Zobrist kind of potential guy, play all over the field. He's a switch hitter, he's a good hitter, and really interesting. You get him really cheap. Why wouldn't you add another that's a roster improvement, right? That's another, but they're starting to accumulate a whole bunch of guys in the same ilk that are real interesting guys, nice players. Get them cheap. Then what do you do with your roster? Then you have roster decisions to make, and it's kind of like playing gin rummy. You can't pick up every ace you see. Sometimes it doesn't work.
And the speculation is he might get $9 or $10 million a year. I guess the place he would fit is if you aren't completely convinced that Sano and or Scope are going to be good players all season, then he's your Eduardo Escobar, can take over either spot. My concern is he's had one exceptional big league season, and he's had a lot of pretty good big league seasons. And so, if you're signing him to be the 2017 version of himself, then you're going to be very happy with him, even if you pay a lot of money. If you're getting the other versions, he is more of just a utility guy,
right? And a good utility player. I think he's. You have to look at the other guys you have, and he's not as good a defensive player as the other utility guys that the Twins have run out there, but he's a better offensive player. And so, what's the combination there, and how do you feel about that? I haven't looked at his splits between home and away, but I will just tell you that Houston is a wonderful place to hit.
That's a good point, too. Yep. I could probably look that up as we talk here.
But anyway, I think that particular deal is that's fine if you don't spend too much money. That's fine. I don't have an awful lot of interest in that, but that's an upgrade to the roster to some way in some ways of thinking, and it could be part of a trade package at some point in time. You just never know. As long as you're upgrading, as long as you continue to get better and better guys, on the roster, it's never a bad thing.
And looking at his home and road splits, interestingly, he hits better away from Houston.
Well, I think that says a lot.
Yeah, that is an interesting thing. I don't want to do a ton on Kimbrel and Harper, but I will say that the reports from people I have, I stay in touch with, have said that the Phillies are now saying privately, hey, we ain't paying that kind of Machado money for Harper. So it's still, even though the Machado thing kind of came out of left field and you can say, okay, no collusion, obviously teams are willing to spend, we still don't know if Harper's going to get paid the way he expected to get paid.
Right. And I still like the Kimbrel deal.
I know.
I still like having a lockdown closer for the next 3 years at least. And again, you have to say, well, but what if he's 30 years old, and what if he gets, he hurts his arm? He's never had those kinds of issues. He seems like a rock solid horse physically, and so I think it's depending on the money, I think it's a pretty good gamble for locking down 40 games for sure. I mean, I think a closer, as I've said, I just think a closer is so important. Now, the other thing that the Brain Trust is paid to do is make great decisions and be right about young players like Romero, who maybe he turns into the next Mariano Rivera. I mean, you just don't know. I mean, you say we don't have a closer, and then they say, well, maybe we do. Maybe if we have enough competition between, May and Romero and some of these other guys, maybe someone emerges as a lockdown guy. Well, great, you were brilliant. You save a franchise a whole bunch of money, but they've got to be right about that.
Yeah, and that's where I would like to see the Yankee approach, which is bring in John Wetland, Craig Kimbrel to be your closer, and let Romero
be the eighth. Romero
and Taylor Rogers.
And Taylor Rogers, who I think has a chance to be really good now in the seventh and eighth inning. I really do like it. I like it from, as I mentioned before, I like it from the standpoint of what if all your young guys take off, go off this year? What if Sano and Buxton and Kepler go off, and Rosario continues to be Rosario, and Jonathan Scope and Nelson Cruz are decent? What if? You sure don't want to have that team, doing that and be in a situation where you fail to close 13 out of your first 15 games like they did in 16? I mean, that was devastating. That's how they started 0-9 and 3 for the first 3 months, it seemed like. What if?
Yeah, I agree. A couple Twitter questions from Shorzy, who comes out to the live hockey broadcasts.
I saw that she asked, she's clamoring for us to do a live show somewhere.
Yeah, and we would like to. So if anybody knows a bar, restaurant, business owner who wants to have us, pull in some customers for them and do live shows, we are open to that. I actually think this show I think sometimes the show is even better live, just because I think you get fired up about it and we get to interact with people. From Shorzy, Astudillo, joining the team for opening day, ? I hope so. And I'm going to tie this in with Lucas Rechin, so also a longtime listener. He said, ask Roy if he's ever seen a player the same level of quality as Astudillo generate the same amount of fan interest and buzz around him. Let's kind of get into the Astudillo effect here.
I don't know that I have seen anyone generate that kind of buzz and that kind of cult following, having played in the big leagues for 30 days and not had that many at-bats.
Right.
I don't think I've seen a phenomenon like like Astudillo. And frankly, I'm happy for him and for the